like individuals and SMEs thought that they will finally get a rip from the new regulation. The intended goal was to lower costs for individuals and businesses. However, that never came to pass as banks on their part slowed down or halted lending to this vital segment and instead focused on lending to government and big businesses where they were assured of high returns. We cannot allow that to happen, and the onus is now on the institutions to meet their end of the bargain. The banking sector regulator, that is CBK, deserves to be commended for cracking the whip on the financial institutions. Borrowers will be relieved that the regulator has their back when it comes to pushing for access to vital credit. That is just a slice of what we're going to be discussing today. Also, some of the 15 listed firms on NSE, that is on the profit warnings, will be a subject to also discuss this morning with our panelists here on AM Live. So let's keep out our ears to listen to actually what will be happening this morning, and to also keep our eyes peeled and see what will be also happening as well as far as the state of economy is concerned. And this morning I'll be joined by Ali Kansacho, who is the CEO of Rich Management and also a financial analyst. Also, we'll be joined by the Director General East Africa, that is African Development Bank. We'll have Director General Gabriel Negatu. We'll be joined much later by also the CEO of Nairobi Securities Exchange, Geoffrey Udundo, and also the CEO of Kenya Bankers Association, that is Dr. Habil Olaka, and also Dr. Gituro Wanaina, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi School of Business. So there's a lot to discuss, and also you get to drive a show with me. You can hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is our Twitter handle. AM Live NTV, our profile name on Facebook, and 20686, our SMS portal. So let's get cracking. Before we drill deeper with the discussion, we'll take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly in our dailies today. Beginning with the Daily Nation, this is what you're waking up to today. State of the Nation nightmare is a splash today. Expectations are high among Kenyans that today the head of state will use the occasion to demonstrate his resolve to slay the corruption dragon, and as he did in 2015 when he sent home 5 ministers in one fell swoop. But this will come at a high political price. That story is tucked away on page 5 of the Daily Nation today, and on top there the flagger reads, "Will President Kenyatta crack the whip?" That is on graft. Will President Kenyatta crack the whip? That is the probing question. As I've mentioned, you can follow the story on page 5, but the pain points are here, right? The pain points. That is corruption. The 21 billion shillings dam scandal involving at least 3 cabinet secretaries is one of a long list of projects where billions of shillings have been paid with little or nothing to show for them. Also on food security, a debilitating drought has resulted in a serious shortage of food in some parts of the country, while multi-billion shilling projects that were aimed at ensuring food security have collapsed. Also on unemployment, thousands of unemployed youth have resorted to alternative, sometimes unethical money-making ventures, including full-time betting and gambling. Debt. A third Eurobond whose proceeds will be used to pay another debt is in the offing. Experts say the unfettered appetite for loans could bring the country's economy to its knees. That also will be part of our discussion today with our panelists on the state of economy here in the market. Also politics. While a 2018 handshake with opposition leader Raila Odinga created a sense of calm on the political stage, the rift is widening between supporters of President Kenyatta and those of Deputy President William Ruto over graft war. These are the main points which they've been very craftily put here as the pain points on the front page of the Daily Nation this morning. Now Juang opts to face the tribunal. That is another story tucked away as a side by story. Supreme Court Judge Jackton Ojwang says he will face the tribunal appointed by President Kenyatta to probe his conduct, negating speculations that he will opt to resign. Whereas Justice Ojwang declined to face the Judicial Service Commission to respond to allegations of abuse of office, close aides said he was preparing his defense. This story is tucked away on page 4 of the Daily Nation this morning. And this is how it looks. So make sure you grab a copy of the Daily Nation. Also there, crisis in 4 counties as fuel pumps run dry. That story is on page 8. Transport nearly paralyzed in Nakuru, Nyandarua, Kericho and Bomet following major shortage of petroleum products. Also, doctor accused of sexual assault. Dr. Martin Ajujo, the trainee surgeon accused of botching a breast enlargement leading to patient's death, is now facing charges of sexually assaulting an American colleague. And that story is tucked away on page 2 of the Daily Nation this morning. The Standard is up next, and this is what you're waking up to. 6-meter road may crush top judges. 6-meter road may crush top judge's career, I should say. 6-meter road may crush top judge's career. That is the splash on the front page of the Standard. Big puzzle tribunal set up by Uhuru on removal of Justice J.B. Ojwang gets down to work as it emerges the road Migori governor supposedly used to entice him is a murramed stretch of 6-meter width and is not exclusively for his own use. This story continues on page 6 and 7 of the Standard this morning. Mudavadi, how Uhuru and Ruto tricked me. And this was, of course, a revelation from the point-blank interview that he had there. You can follow the story inside the Standard today. Also, new grafter expose ahead of president's speech. As Kenyans wait to hear what the president, Uhuru Kenyatta, has to say on runaway corruption, EACC will be pouncing on 4 governors anytime. Some of the governors have stashed stolen cash in foreign accounts, while others acquired property worth millions of shillings. And you can follow the story on page 4 of the Standard this morning. The Star is up next, and this is your splash today. Corruption as bad as murder, says magistrate in governor case. Ogoti explains 150 million shillings bond, judge reduces bail to 10 million shillings. And you can follow this story inside the Star. In an interview with the Star, Chief Magistrate Ogoti explains his tough stand on corruption. That story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. Also, Linturi Kitani love brewed in DP Ruto office. Meru Senator Mithika Linturi and his estranged wife Mary Kitani met as Deputy President William Ruto's office at Deputy President William Ruto's office 6 years ago when she was the DP's Chief of Staff. In an explosive affidavit filed in court, Kitani claims that she met the senator in 2013 when he had come to see the Deputy President. You can follow the story on page 3 of the Star this morning. Still on the front page of the Star, Ministry stalled mobile clinics to be put to use. The government will spend another 666 million shillings to make use of the 100 container clinics bought in 2015. The mobile clinics, idle for 4 years, cost 1 billion shillings. The 666 million shillings will be enough to furnish and run the clinics for 1 year, Health Principal Secretary Susan Mochache has said. This you can follow the story on page 10 of the Star. Also, KPC at pains to explain Amoco tender award. Kenya Pipeline Company bosses were yesterday at pains to explain how Amoco was introduced as a co-insurer for its 136 billion shillings assets. The officials failed to tell the Senate Energy Committee how the firm was procured. It was introduced by a firm the bosses had tendered as an insurance broker. And remember, this particular firm also has been largely involved. This is the insurance firm in the dams scandal as well. You can follow the story on page 11 of the Star as well. Let's move on and we see what is also on the front page of the People Daily. And this is your splash today. Ruto to Uhuru. You brought idlers to Jubilee. This is what we have as a splash today. Ruto to Uhuru. You brought idlers to Jubilee. Gloves or gloves off? Gloves off? That's a probing question. Gloves off? Right, that's tipping off my tongue. Not nicely. It says DP accuses Raila, who since last year's handshake is backing president's anti-graft war, of brewing confusion, friction in ruling party to derail its service delivery and development agenda. That story also, you can follow it on page 6 of the People Daily this morning. Also, graft war, big four to dominate state of nation address. That story, you can follow it on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Also, Linturi's wife strips senator naked, accuses him of bigamy. You can follow this story also inside the People Daily this morning. Let's move on and to see what we have on the front page of Taifa Leo. Ahadi za Rais bungeni bado hewa. Ahadi za Rais bungeni bado hewa. is a splash today. Kila mwaka Uhuru amekuwa akisema atakayofanya, lakini baadhi ya mambo hayo hayajatimia. That is the story you can follow also inside Taifa Leo. Also Katu sitaacha kutangatanga, asema Ruto. Katu sitaacha kutangatanga, asema Ruto. And this story continues on page 2. And we can see here kikao wafanya mashauriano, that is Mama Taifa Margaret Kenyatta akishauriana na aliyekuwa rais wa Marekani Barack Obama jana wakati wa mkutano wa 19 wa baraza la usafiri na utalii, that is WTTC, mjini Sevilla, Uhispania. That is also the standalone picture that we have on the front page of Taifa Leo this morning. The Business Daily is up next, and here you are. Long rain's failure to hit household budgets hardest. Long rain's failure to hit household budgets hardest is a story that you want to follow also on page 4 of the Business Daily today. Treasury also set to feel the pinch as vulnerable rural families seek food relief and the urban poor push for price subsidies. That story tucked away on page 4 of the Business Daily. Also, doctors in Cuba get 188% pay rise. Kenyan doctors in Cuba are set to get 188% pay rise to 144,000 per month as part of reforms to the state-sponsored, I should say, training prompted by the death of their colleague. You can follow this story on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Kenyan lawyers to sue Boeing for Ethiopian crushed debts. A team of local and international advocates is laying the groundwork to sue U.S. aircraft manufacturer Boeing for the debts of Kenyans in last month's Ethiopian Airlines crash. You can follow the story on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. And backless DCI in battle over cars is another story there on the ticker. You can also read that. Today's digit is 4 billion shillings. That is investment in Kenyan Meat Commission in a decade. Also, Kenya climbs healthy states role. The country moved up 13 places to 113 in the Bloomberg survey that could have fared better were it not for factors such as sanitation and risky behaviors, including smoking. Also, pension assets up to 1.2 trillion shillings is another story that you can follow on page 19 of the Business Daily this morning. And we can see a standalone picture here. Shopping festival. Top government officials launch of the 3rd annual Manufacturing Expo dubbed Changamka Kenya Shopping Festival at Kasarani Stadium yesterday. Among them were Investment and Industry PS Betty Minor. Also, we can see Industry and Trade Secretary Peter Munya and Kenya Association of Manufacturers Chairman, that is Sachen Gudka, and CAM CEO as well, Phyllis Wakiaga. The festival, which is open to the public, ends on Saturday. That's how it looks today on the front page of the Business Daily. Let's cross over now to Tanzania and we pick up what is on the front page of the Citizen. Vodacom boasts in court over 6 billion shillings. 6 billion shillings wrap. That is what we have on the front page of the Citizen. It says Hisham Hendi, who was appointed only last week, was charged with heading a criminal network and occasioning the government a loss of 5.89 billion shillings. This story continues on page 2 of the Citizen. I'll go when my tenure ends. That is what John Pombe Magufuli reaffirms here. You can follow the story on page 2 of the Citizen as well. Top Arusha hotels may go under the hammer. Read all the details on page 2 of the Citizen. If you're waking up in Tanzania, Mwananchi is the Swahili version of the Citizen, and this is your splash today. CAG wingu zito mwenyewe atahadharisha linaweza kulibuka tatizo kubwa zaidi badala ya kupata suluhisho. You can follow all the details also on page 2 and 3 of Mwananchi as well. Magufuli, muda wangu ukifika nitaondoka tarehe hiyo hiyo. That is what he says, and that is the story that you can follow also on page 4 of Mwananchi. Let's see what is happening in Uganda, and the Daily Monitor is up next. Security seal off border in hunt for tourist kidnappers is a story there. Kidnappers are demanding 1.8 billion shillings ransom. The suspect left two other elderly tourists in the tour van unharmed but took away the car keys. And you can follow the story on page 4 of the car key, and you can follow the story on page 4 of the Daily Monitor. This picture here is traders protesting the closure of shops and how they were handled by policemen. This story continues on page 5 of the Daily Monitor in Uganda. Let's see what is happening in Rwanda briefly. Try to see what is actually on the front page of. Try and lift it up for you quickly so that we can see what it is holding for us. Well, it seems I didn't pick it up, but I can show you what is on the front page of the East African this week nonetheless. And this is the splash today. A game of wits. Suddenly they are meeting and making the right diplomatic noises, but there is still deep unease. This is the story tucked away on page 4 and 5 of the East African this week. CBK win the boost to top banks' profits is another story. Analysts warn of declining credit to the private sector and a rise in NPLs. That is another story. You can follow on page 49. It says Kenya's top banks have posted impressive profits for 2018, benefiting from central bank's one-year earnings protection window in the implementation of International Financial Reporting Standards, IFRS 9, which demands higher provisioning of bad loans. That story, as I've mentioned, you have it on page 49 of this week's The East African. A quick look now at what we have also on the front page of the Wall Street Journal quickly. And this is what you're waking up to this morning on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Chicago historic mayoral race ends decisively, and you can see the choice here. That is Lori Lightfoot, who won Tuesday's runoff election to become Chicago's first black woman mayor, defeating challenger, that is Toni Preckwinkle, in a lopsided victory. Ms. Lightfoot will also be the first gay person to lead the nation's third largest city. That is what is on the front page of the Wall Street Journal this morning. Of course, the time zone difference notwithstanding, Ethiopia pilots followed Boeing's steps. This is what is emerging on the front page of the Wall Street Journal as well. Suspect system was turned off and then back on in attempt to recover nosedive. That story, you can follow it on page 4 or page 7 of the Wall Street Journal. UK's May court's opposition to try to end Brexit standoff. You know this particular story, and we are yet to see what will be the development. She's seeking actually to have an extension of Article 50. Of course, this is in light of what is happening with Brexit. So you can follow this story as well on page 9 of the Wall Street Journal this morning. A quick look now at the editorial cartoons finally. And this is what has been drawn by Gado inside the Standard today. State of the Nation. And you can see the posy of goons led by Antoinette there. And the others, also the clergy, in this as well. Money everywhere is falling every which way. And they're celebrating. And it says, well, actually they're singing. Unionyeshe nitakate. All right, I'll leave it for them that really know that particular song. But you know it, this is how they're singing. That is the state of the nation, according to many of them. Of course, money falling everywhere. Yeah, we'll be joined by our panelists to also sing together on this. Right. And also, this is what is inside the People Daily today. Welcome to Arrow Dam. Truth about Arrow Dam. This is Kinoti, right? And the reality files. This is what has been drawn by Stano. And also, we do have, this is inside the Star today. Of course, about the resignation of Bouteflika. Bouteflika steps down. This is what we have captured, or has been captured inside the Star today. And lastly, let's see what we do have also inside the Daily Nation today. A quick look, let me try and pick it. This is what has been drawn by Munene today. I cannot expand it. Let me try and see it will actually. There you go. Right. Legacy. It's looking the other way, and also Ruto 22 looking the other way. This is what has been aptly captured by Munene inside the Daily Nation today. So those are your dailies. Make sure you grab a copy of the Daily Nation, the Star, the Standard, whichever paper, as I always say, that really floats your boat for these riveting, compelling stories. But for now, the highlights. Right, this morning we shall be looking at the NSE outlook. Of course, 15 firms, NSE firms, have issued profit alerts, profit warnings alerts, and this has plunged to 14 billion shillings. We shall be looking this and a raft of other issues also with our panelists today. Also, the NSE trading system that failed again for 6 hours is another story that we want to follow. Also, CBK, we know that has given a directive that banks should allocate 20% of their lending to SMEs. That also will be a basis of our discussion. And the reality of the Kenya's debt burden. Public debt up by 233.5 billion shillings in 6 months. What does it portend for the economy? That is also what we shall be looking at in today's state of economy. Now, Kenyans soaking in debt to finance their consumption patterns, hence worsening the country's saving position. This is according to the 2019 Finances Household Survey released by the Central Bank. The survey shows that 83% of Kenyans are formally included in the financial space, up from 75% in 2016. But it also indicates that nearly 2/3 of them attest to having trouble making ends meet. Alex Mwangi, start us off.
Despite the spread of formal finance such that only 11% of Kenyans do not have access, over 60% of the population still uses informal solutions such as chamas or borrowing from friends and family in order to address their financial shortcomings.
When we see that people's needs are mainly being met through friends and family borrowing or through going out to find more work, rather than through turning to a financial service, a regulated financial service, we need to be a bit concerned.
The use of mobile money, mobile banking and digital apps has risen substantially in recent years, but questions abound on the extent of the effectiveness of the current regulatory regime.
This unregulated perimeter means that there is some policy concerns that needs to be addressed so that there is closing of that perimeter cap.
I think where we've arrived, after 5 years of growth in digital lending, we are getting to a point where certain policy issues are arising. And regulation always follows innovation.
A lot of how the CRBs were set up was fashioned to serve the banks back then. So the kind of data that the banks share, the frequency, the volume, is quite different from what the digital lenders want to share. And the format is also different.
The 5th FinAccess survey finds that cash still rules the Kenyan economy, accounting for 98% of daily transactions despite the pervasiveness of mobile money. More Kenyans are borrowing from shopkeepers by taking goods on credit, 30% in 2019 as compared to 10% in 2016, while the uptake of mobile banking has gone up from 6% to 10%. Alex Mwangi, NTV.
Now you have until April the 12th to submit comments on the draft comprehensive unclaimed financial assets policy drawn by the National Treasury. The draft policy comes against the backdrop of rising calls to review the Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority's regulations of 2016 with the interest of reaching a wider scope of claimants. The present framework has also been faulted for leaving out vital assets such as mobile money balances, among other objectives. The draft policy provides for the periodic review and identification of unclaimed financial assets. The draft policy also proposes inclusion of audit of unclaimed financial assets in the financial reporting of holding institutions. In November 2018, the Unclaimed Financial Assets reported that it was holding up to 13 billion shillings worth of unclaimed assets. Now, food insecurity in the country is set to persist in the coming months following delays in the start of the March to May long rains as well as the forecasted rainfall deficit in April. Stakeholders in the food and nutrition sector are warning that food shortage is likely to peak from June to October, particularly in arid and semi-arid areas, with the current dry conditions and high temperatures affecting agricultural productivity. Lillian Carey has more on this.
Tough days lay ahead if the current dry spells persist, as the severity and size of the food insecure population is set to escalate. According to the Food Security and Nutrition Working Group, fronted by the United Nations and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, warning bells are also ringing on the potential of an increase in acute malnutrition of children under the age of 5 if the government does not promptly act to strengthen agricultural productivity in the country. The report also reveals that around 10.7 million people are currently food insecure across Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Karamoja region in Uganda. This even as the Institute of Economic Affairs blames the food crisis on lack of implementations of policies to boost agricultural productivity by the government.
We are saying there are very well deeply thought of blueprints which encompass policies, programs, projects and plans. Some of them have been attacked, like the Galana Kulalu rather, but didn't yield fruits. There are issues with that. Maybe there's a need to relook at the design and implementation per se. But yes, we are saying these are gathering dust in the shelves.
The declining agricultural productivity has also been blamed for the lack of support on many initiatives previously fronted to boost agricultural performance.
There's need to undertake a review of these initiatives. Key among them is the subsidy program, and not just the program itself, but in the way it's designed and also in the way it's implemented.
The government has also been asked to strive in releasing drought-related contingency funding early to ensure timely responses and actions. Lillian Kiarie, NTV Business.
All right, that is the state of affairs as far as food security is concerned. Make sure you grab a copy of the Business Daily this morning and see what is headlining for you. We have a very comprehensive, of course, coverage of this. Long-range failure to hit household budgets hardest. Treasury also set to feel the pinch as vulnerable rural families seek food relief, and the urban poor push for price subsidies. You can follow the story on page 4 of the Business Daily today. And also, we have some graphics for you as well, just indicating how this is prevalent. It is showcased here. Failed rains when the forecasted rains were deemed to start. So far, the rains have failed, leaving over 1 million Kenyans exposed to starvation. All that tucked away on page 4 of the Business Daily. Right, you're watching In the Market. And of course, today we want to train our focus on the state of the economy. Now, on Monday, we had this particular splash on the front page of the Business Daily. 15 NSE firms issue alert as profit plunge 14 billion shillings. Sharp drop in earnings points to weak economic recovery and dim job prospects. And just tucked away also, it says 15 Nairobi security firms, 15 Nairobi Securities Exchange listed firms are facing 13.8 billion shillings plunge in profits in 9 months since June last year, as tough economic environment and corporate governance malpractices eat into companies' earnings. This story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily. And also, the NSE trading system failed for more than 6 hours on Monday, dealing a major blow to many investors. The outage was the third in a span of 6 months, following similar glitches in January this year and last October. The financial knocks that came with such outages are always enormous, as witnessed on Monday when the market turnover dipped 57.4% to 369 million shillings compared to 865.3 million shillings recorded on Monday the previous week. The recurrent outages are costly, cannot therefore be overstated. That is why the management of the Nairobi Security Exchange should swiftly review the reliability and suitability of the bonds trading system and address the flaws that risks hurting investors' confidence. And we're looking at the state of the economy. And with us as well is the CEO of the Nairobi Securities Exchange. This is Geoffrey Odundo. Allow me to introduce all our panelists as well. We have Ali Kansachu, who is the CEO of Rich Management and also financial analyst. We do have with us also the CEO of Kenya Bankers Association. This is Dr. Habil Olaka, also the Director General, East Africa, African Development Bank, and also Dr. Gituro Wanaina, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi and also an expert on corporate governance as well. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Right, a gloomy look to start with from Nairobi Security Exchange. And Geoffrey Odundo, you're here on the spot as well. Right, looking at that, and of course on Monday, it seems you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. So Mondays are listed firms. Then we have, again, the power outage.
Debarl, I think, because we have got some heavy hybrids, right?
Sleepless nights.
So, yeah, well, I think it's an unfortunate coincidence that we had a very tough start to the week. Yes, I think maybe just to start with the system outage, I think is a very, very big concern, especially in the recent occurrences.
Yes.
One thing I want maybe just to give a background on the platform we operate on.
Yes.
So we are using a platform called Millennium IT, which is a London Stock Exchange owned technology.
Yes.
And we brought in this platform in 2006. Now, so for the last 13 years, we've been on that platform. We have not experienced very high levels of outages. A very good demonstration that the platform is highly resilient. This platform has enabled our market scale up because since we introduced it in 2006, the level of trades have increased immensely. The efficiency and execution have done very well, and hence we've not seen very major issues with the system. But that notwithstanding, I think 13 years is a long time. The system is certainly end of life and needs to be changed. We commenced the process of the changeover to a new system about 3 years ago. And this takes quite some time because you need to scope, you need to ensure that all the components that you're looking at are really are in line, and looking at also the dependencies we have in the external environment. We also have to make sure that is in place. And so the recent two outages were a bit unfortunate. It's more to do with the end-to-end system. We have a front end that is the trading platform, and we have a back end, which is a depository and settlements platform. And if those two systems do not communicate on a real time, then you have to have an outage. And normally the start of day processes take a bit of time, and checks have to be done before the market is opened. Unfortunately, in this last event, the communication did not happen early enough, and hence we had to take time to restart the system, and the restart process and start of day processes then delayed a bit. But however, we were able to repoint the system and recover it and start it up and start for trading. And we did actually trade for 2 hours, 3 to 5. Now, as the NSC, we regret that event. We have very, we've put our teams on high alert for any future outages, and to ensure that we do not have such failures even as we proceed towards a full upgrade, which we expect to have by the middle of this year. The full system should be in place. Now, I want to say that outages are not peculiar to our markets. I think these happen often, and I was just looking at the case that happened in JSE some time back, and so we have to just remain conscious that we need to have systems that we can migrate to real time, have disaster recovery that we can migrate to real time, and that's what we put in place as the NSC. So I must just assure the public that these unfortunate occurrences, in our view, will be addressed in the future. We would not, barring any surprises, we have put in place robust mechanism to ensure that failures do not.
But the writing has been on the wall. This is not the first time, right?
Yes.
You've said, you've indicated 13 years is a long time. So what have you been doing within that?
I must say that the migration process, the system upgrade process, did start, as I said earlier, 3 years ago. Now, this system has almost a 10-year lifespan, and we we had never had an issue. And so planning began very well in advance, and we were hoping to get to market about close to 2 years ago. Unfortunately, the way our market is reliant, it's not just NIC systems that have to be upgraded, the dependencies on the depository side also have to be upgraded, and these have taken a bit of time. And so we've been cautious about this. We did not anticipate these outages to happen because we have always had upgrades, patches, and improvements being given to us on a real-time basis. So these are just unfortunate events.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, and of course we have to comment also on what is on the front page of the Monday's Business Daily. Is it a cause for worry? 15 listed firms, alerting us on profit warnings.
Well, certainly one thing that the NSC does present is it gives you a window of the state of the economy, as you like to say it.
Absolutely.
And so it's a reflection.
It's a reflection
of what's happening in the economy, on various sectors.
Absolutely.
So what you're seeing here is an indicator of some of the challenges, both local and global. On our side, when we assess the performance of companies, we take a global view, bring it out to the macro and then the micro view. And a global view of what's happened in the economy globally is that last year we had strong recovery of the American economy with stable interest rates happening. We had challenges facing the emerging markets. I remember the case in Argentina and Turkey, the Brexit issues. And these issues does affect our trading potential globally. Looking at it locally, the slow credit growth, again, affected a number of institutions. The local economic tightening, especially in the second half of the year.
Yes.
The purchasing index and issues around that. And so these affected all these companies. So what you're seeing here is really a broad reflection of the economy. It does concern us because we have to make sure that we want our markets to be more attractive to the international investors. We are in a global environment. We must compete effectively. And I think the firms are very conscious about this. Most of the firms are conscious about the performance of their shares on the exchange, and hence I think are out there to ensure that they probably take into turnaround strategies to improve their performance. So we are definitely alerted to that, and we are concerned about it.
Right. Ali Gansachu, earlier on we saw this year that Nairobi Security Exchange investors are closed, this was in January, with a paper gain of 148.69 billion shillings as three key market indices shrugged off, even a terror attack that we had. And then now we can see it's really going down the tubes, and looking at that and what Odundo is telling us, this is indicative of what is happening to the economy. Just give us also your outlook on this.
So can I just contextualize
Sure.
it? In 2018, it really was, like the Queen said in 1992, an annus horribilis for investors worldwide. If you look at a basket of asset prices, 93% out of 100 dropped in value in 2018 globally. Best performing instruments, you would have been called a genius, were in fact to have bought Kenya shillings January the 1st, 2018, bought 1 year treasury bills, sold them at the end of the year, bagged an 8-9% gain, added your FX to it, and basically the two best trades to have done worldwide was that and Egyptian T-bills. 93% were underwater wherever you looked in the world. So that's the first point. So I think naturally, in the nature of the markets is one should see a bit of a recovery, and we've seen what I would call a quarter mirabilis in various parts of the world. So there's been a significant recovery. So when you're looking at that headline, you're looking at 2018, and particularly if you notice the insurance companies, they tend to be long assets. Those assets were marked down. So, if you are an intelligent investor, frankly, this is the opportunity to pick up good assets amongst the debris as everybody is looking at it through the rear view mirror. So I would say quite agree with the chief executive. It does reflect the economy. The economy is bifurcated. There are some parts which are doing very well. Digital economy, it's not difficult to work out which ones the banks, the tier 1 banks. And then of course you've got other parts which are finding it difficult. Spending power amongst our people is diminished. You know, there's a lack of liquidity in the system. That's obvious to everybody. The credit squeeze has affected SMEs. And I think, you know, we've got to look at it from that perspective. How do we stimulate this economy? And I would say, you know, you can look at it as a glass half full or a glass half empty.
Yes.
If we're growing at 6.1 to 6.3% without credit, what would we be growing at if we got this thing moving, right? I mean, it seems to me, when I see these numbers, and I appreciate everyone, there's no growth in these numbers really, right? You know, and I went through your report, and I'm sure Gabriel's going to tell us about it, but I think if I look at it, I say to policymakers, guys, I mean, you've got a platform here. Now let's get more credit into the patient, and let's see how this economy picks up. So not all doom and gloom, but it was a very tough year last year, but contextualize it in the context of a tough year everywhere. For, investors since the beginning of January, if they pick their spots, have had some very handsome returns. You know, you've had 30% gains in I&M, NIC, Safaricom's up 24, 25%. Safaricom's very much the anchor for the NSE because of its weighting. So as long as the following happens from a macro point of view, the oil price doesn't run away because we still import all our oil. It had a very strong quarter, up 31% because of the amount of tax on fuel. When you fill it, you don't experience those ups and downs in prices, but it affects the government. We have to pay more for the oil. As long as the shilling holds and as long as interest rates hold, then I think, you know, overall I would say we should see an improvement. And we've also got to get this Eurobond off the ground, because if you just look at the numbers, it needs to be rolled over. And I think, you know, we shouldn't dilly-dally. You've had a good run in emerging and frontier markets, but I kind of think there's a massive influenza that could come out of Istanbul and infect emerging markets and put a lot of pressure on them. So that's my worry.
But also on the issue of, despite the fact that we have that, you say not really doom and gloom on the economy, but still it's affecting it. But on the other flip is the issue of corporate governance, because some of these firms that are listed here, if we look, we can see beginning with Kenya Power. What really started with Kenya Power there, we know the issue with the issue with the billing. That was a big scandal as well, and Britain going down the list as well. So they are juxtaposed. It's not just economy, but also issues of corruption as well. Just largely looking at corporate governance. I don't know what would be your pick, Habilolaka.
I think it's an interesting one. You know, corporate governance seems to pervade the whole, you know, the whole picture. But just pulling back a little bit because of the background that Geoffrey gave, in terms of the fact that if you look at the performance of the Kenyan economy, and especially 2018, because that's where we are coming from. And I'll just take it back a little bit to 2017, because that's where it really begins. 2017 was an election year. There was the slowdown in the economy, and we are expecting 2018 to be the year when because that's now behind us, and that was the year when we hoped that it will pick up, but the pickup was a bit sluggish. So 2018, basically, we have not seen the expected resurgence of the economy as would have been expected. You talked about the performance on the NSC, and there was the illusion of the fact that some segments seems to have done well, and banking in particular may appear like they were not quite as impacted in terms of the overall performance of the stocks on the NSC. But I think if you look at where the performance has resurged from, most of it arises out of, for example, investing in treasury instruments. Part of it arising out of investing outside Kenya. Part of it arising out of focusing rather than on direct lending, going into fee-based products that were not affected by the interest capping. But I think we have also seen, just to come back to your point about the fact that corporate governance is really an issue. The performance of a sector is seriously affected by the corporate governance issues that come out of the sector, and banking sector is not different. We saw what happened in 2015, 2016, when there were issues that propped up in the banking sector, and all of them were touching on corporate governance. 3 banks in a range of 5-6 months were put down by the regulator, and all of them had something common in them. It was issues to do with corporate governance, and it really affected the banking sector. And up to date, we can't say that it has completely recovered from the effects of that malpractice. But I think what has come out of it is that we have now tried to put measures in place to ensure that those issues that arose that almost like dragged down the sector. And by the way, dragging down the sector in a way also dragged down the economy, because as you mentioned, the unavailability of credit in the market tends to drag down the full potential in terms of growth for the economy. So we're looking at it from that perspective in terms of let's fix these corporate governance issues within the sector. And out of that, you must have seen there was the Code of Ethics for Business in Kenya, which KBO was aligned to and its members. There is recently there is a banking sector charter that has now become effective from the central bank, and the central bank gave out this charter sort of like to guide the conduct of its regulated institutions in terms of transparency, in terms of fairness to the consumer, in terms of the cost of the services, so that right now the products are supposed to be within a framework of risk-based pricing. So a number of measures have been brought in to ensure that on the corporate governance side, the sector members are well aligned to the expectations of the market.
Right. Let's hear from Debarl Inea.
On the corporate governance issues?
Corporate governance and generally just the performance of NSE, just briefly.
I think in Kenya, we've kind of been spoiled because we expect year on year these excellent numbers that you almost come to expect them every year. And when there's a blip in a year or two, then we all get a bit nervous. But the numbers you see now, the numbers you saw on Monday, are probably the numbers from last year. And there's a slow pickup in terms of recovery. And I think this will not stay. You will begin to see maybe in the next round of numbers better reporting. But as has been explained by everyone, the number of factors. Corporate governance, it's definitely an emerging issue, and I think we should celebrate that the governor of central bank has taken quick and immediate action to introduce several measures to ensure that corporate governance does not derail any more of the institutions. I think some of the lessons from the previous banks that have gone under has allowed Kenya to keep tightening its corporate governance procedures. So I am certain that we will not be seeing what we've seen in the past 2-3 years, where you've had a few banks go under. So there's enough, in my view, adequate measures have been taken to ensure that it does not affect the performance of the sector in general. But having said that, yes, it is a challenge. It persists, and Kenya is not an exception, but certainly the steps being taken, I think, should give confidence to the consumers.
Right. Dr. Gituro, finally.
Thank you for having me here. And I think I want to maybe do a recap and 2 things. I think from last week, Thursday, a week today, we talked on the issue of corporate governance. And it's interesting, on Friday, the Daily Nation, there was a page interesting that you find a public servant has signed the accounts of a private company. So they were actually, one director is purely from a private company, the other director is from the public. And really going by the chapter 6 of the Constitution, you can't do that. I can't hold a public office, and I'm also in a private as a director. And to me, those are things which perhaps talks about the corporate governance. The second point I want to make is, I think I was so happy with the Kenya Union of Journalists. They actually cancelled the awards for the petroleum sector, whatever you call it, because of integrity issues. So as you see the power sector in terms of the NSC giving warning, it's also giving other areas that these people have question marks. And I like what they say, no, we are not going to do this here because these guys have issues of corporate governance. And those are the things I think we need to pick. I would perhaps, and I agree with the 20% reduction, or sorry, giving the alerts. Of course, it's a reflection, it's delayed response. You can't have 2019, it's reflected in 2018. But if you go back to most of those issues, I agree with you, Dr. On top of the political atmosphere we had, there are a lot of corporate issues in those institutions. How do you explain a PS being in a board of a private company? How do you explain that? And have the pen to make certain decisions to ensure your firm gets whatever I'm doing. And I think, Odudo, when we talk about NSC, I think we need, it's not just enough that we have brought this on board, we have brought that on. It's how we implement that law. If I was in charge of those responsibilities, that person in the public sector should be in it today. You can't. And I think that's what's happening in all this. And I like the headline in the nation. The pain point. I think the president has only one pain point. Corruption.
That is in the Daily Nation today.
Yeah, that's the only pain point he has.
Okay. Right. Let's come, as we're winding up, just briefly on also on this. You know, blue chip stocks.
Sorry, and I like how their report has come out. It's, what would I say? It's a gentleman kind of a report. But you can see all their red ties in the gentleman.
I'm the one who didn't, and you, we didn't get the memo on the red ties.
Okay. You need to call a spade a spade. Whether you want to call it transaction costs, you are shy. And actually, look, we are going out there. Tish, you know that. We are going there looking for 25B. Eurobond 3.
All right, we shall discuss that.
250.
Yeah, yes, 250.
Yeah.
250. Yeah, that is coming ahead. I think you're jumping the gun. I'm the moderator.
Let's keep it that way, yeah.
Yeah, let's keep it that way. All right, let's come to you, Odundo, briefly, just because we've got around, in fact, a minute. Yeah, but maybe you should just be mulling over this as we take a short break. You know, some of these are some of the blue chip companies that we've seen, and the blue chip stock recorded a sharp share price gains at NSE, lifting also the bounce past the psychological, 3,000 points mark for the first time in 5 months. And it's a shame sometimes when you see some of these firms also listed here, yet they were actually performing, glowingly, right? Just marinate over that as we take a short break. And of course, when we come back, we shall be looking deeper on what is happening also in other sectors, despite the fact that, yes, this is a gloom and doom, as they say. It's not all gloom and doom at the NSC. Things were looking up still. But we shall be looking at other areas as far as the economy is concerned. Debt is one of the facets that we will have to talk about. The Eurobond. That is, can I call it Eurobond 3.0? That is in the offing right now. What does it portend also for the country as well? So that and much on the other side of the break. the state of the economy right now, or just before we took a short break, we were looking at the outlook of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, and of course that was in light of what was also on the front page of the Business Daily on Monday. If you missed it, this is how it looked, right? That we had 15 firms listed, 15 NSE firms issue alerts as profit plunge 14 billion shillings. And we were just trying to see and getting granular with this, what is really affecting, of course, this particular listed firms, as was put in the Business Daily. One of the issues there was, of course, the economy and also the issue of corporate governance as well. And before we took a short break, we promised to hear from the CEO of NSE, Geoffrey Odundo. Just continue with that. Of course, we saw, as I mentioned, yes, we crossed that particular bound, 3,000 what was it again?
Barrier.
Yes, barrier in 5 years. And this is a glowing, performance of the blue chip companies. But we can see top on the agenda or top on the list is also one of the blue chip companies.
Thank you, Debarl. First of all, it's just to say that the NSE this year has actually experienced a resurgence in its performance since the beginning of the year, and largely attributable to a good projection of recovery in the economy, stable interest rates, stronger macro environment, portending very positive for all the firms listed on the exchange. And even last year, the NSE, in terms of dollar returns, despite the plunge in the global stock markets, we've outperformed other African markets. So I still think the attractiveness of the stock exchange to international investors is very strong. What we see today, the turnovers are almost 60–70% foreign. We just demonstrate that there's a lot of attention to our market. But having said that, I think the blue chips have definitely been bullish in the beginning of the year. We've seen very strong recovery on our top 4 counters. And again, it's again a very high availability of the foreign investors who are keen on the market. And let me tell you, the foreign investors make very serious analysis of these firms to assess their earning potential, the risks management they have, the corporate governance framework that they have before they make a decision to invest. So that would not be a surprise, because in the assessment, then they do feel that despite certain challenges, these firms are still very good picks in the beginning of the year. But at the NSE, we are conscious about issues of corporate governance, and we work very closely with the CMA to ensure that corporate governance is adhered to for our public listed companies. We've got various areas we look at. We insist on governance audits, we insist on board evaluations, we insist on adherence of code of corporate governance for listed companies, and all these are being looked at both at our level and at the CMA level, because we believe corporate governance has a very large impact on the performance of stocks and on the integrity of the market. So we do address that. So back to your question around why would the blue chip companies still outperform despite certain challenges, that is the reason. The parameters that they assess, if the earning potential possibly outweigh the challenges they're having on certain areas of corporate governance, they'll still take a decision to invest. And that's why you see that kind of paradox in the beginning, as you rightly put it.
All right. Alikan?
Just to touch on a few points there. Firstly, regarding dollar-based returns 2018, the CEO was saying if you look at it in dollar terms, it wasn't as bad. And that's an important point, and it speaks to the stability of the shilling. The shilling was one of, I think, only 2 currencies last year to, in fact, appreciate against the dollar. And I think, sometimes we kind of give short shrift to the performance of the shilling, and that of itself is a very interesting story about what, why it's performing so well, continues to do well. First of all, when you look at the NSE, 45%, I think, CEO, is Safaricom. Right? So, I mean, if Safaricom is doing well, the NSE is pretty much anchored. This year you've seen Fuliza, there's been a lot of excitement, particularly about the mobile money piece of the earnings curve. Everyone's upgrading M-Pesa. It's gone global with Alibaba and all of this, and people are getting excited about that. So you've had nearly a 25% return in the first quarter in Safaricom, which is big stuff. That's 100% annualized. So that's another point to make. The banks have done relatively well, but what I call it, there's a bifurcation, right? The corporate governance hits the smaller companies worse because the damage can be much, much greater. You know, you haven't got, that's the way I see how it plays out. So I think you've got this sort of split between the good part of the NSC, the part that the foreign investors will go for. They want liquidity, they want market capitalization, they want to see trading volumes, and that's why you get this concentration effect in these bigger stocks as opposed to the smaller stocks. The final point to make is, you know, you were asking about 15 profits warnings. The market is such that, you know, it's like Brexit, right? Every day I watch that thing and you think, how did they rule the world? First question. You know, how for centuries? How did they do this stuff? You know, you can't believe it. The second thing that I kind of think about is we've had 2 years to think about Brexit.
Yes.
Why is the pound the best performing G7 currency this year? It's because asset prices, it's a continually priced market. So there comes a time when everyone says, my God, we've priced all the bad news in. And you see this action, you know, the pound jumps and you're wondering, well, why? Nothing's happened here. But what it is everyone has priced every bit of bad news in the market. And I think the question for the NSE is, have we reached that point that, you know, with a few exceptions, that everything is priced in and therefore the path of least resistance is actually higher?
Right, thank you. I think we're done with the NSE right now. Right? Unless there is
a break. Let's go have a break.
All right.
Thank you, Prof.
Now, it came as a welcome relief recently when the Central Bank of Kenya warned that bank executives will be jailed if they fail to allocate 20% of their lending to small and medium enterprises. The new rules are contained in the Kenya Banking Sector Charter, which prescribes a fine not exceeding 100,000 shillings for bank officials or jail term not exceeding 2 years. It is a well-known fact that SMEs are a key cog in the growth of the economy. And of course, if this vital segment of the economy is denied funding by banks, the country's economy will be the main casualty. When the low capping interest rates came into force in September 2016, small borrowers like individuals and SMEs thought that they will finally get to reap from the new regulation. The intended goal was to lower costs for individuals and businesses. However, that never came to pass, as banks on their part slowed down on halted lending to this vital segment and instead focused on lending to government and big businesses where they were assured of high returns. We cannot allow that to happen. And the onus is now on the institutions to meet their end of the bargain. The banking sector regulator deserves to be commended for cracking the whip on the financial institutions. Borrowers will be relieved that the regulator has their back when it comes to pushing for access to vital credit. And to take up this now is Dr. Habil Olaka, who is CEO of Kenya Bankers Association. First of all, when this particular directive came from CBK, what was your reaction?
I think let's put it in context.
Please. Is it out of context?
Very. I think earlier referred to the banking sector charter.
Yes, you did, yeah.
Through a consultative process, finally the charter was out and it took effect from 1st of March. So it's now in force, and what it tries to do is to create some level of discipline in the market, and especially on issues to do with transparency, consumer protection, and cost of credit. So it's a framework, and I think the impression being given there is like there is directed lending, where institutions are directed to lend to particular sectors at a given amount, and that's not the case. I think what the charter is trying to do is to create a framework where there is a conscious effort to ensure that credit flows to the productive sectors of the economy. And an encouragement where, for instance, SME is identified as a critical sector that requires credit. And given the developments of the interest capping and it being a sector that was particularly affected, what the charter tries to bring in place is some form of risk-based pricing, where there is transparency and you develop, based on the information available, you develop a form of risk grading the entity, and therefore price according to the risk grading of the entity, rather than the previous case where without that level of information, you would more or less rely on a gut feel. An entity is in this particular sector, and therefore you assume that the risk profile is of this nature, and therefore the price is based on that overall picture rather than the specific information about the entity. Now you are supposed to create a framework within the institution where you have got specific information about the entity and you risk grade the entity, and therefore you price it based on its risk. Where good borrowers, for example, are then able to get access to finance that is priced at a rate that is commensurate with the risk that they carry. So it encourages also good performance going forward, because you can see your good performance being rewarded through better pricing. And I think that's the framework that central bank is trying to put in place. But it's not trying to direct entities that you must lend, because you must lend to a particular entity, because otherwise it also has a moral hazard behind it. You know, and we then see NPLs beginning to crop up, and the entity is more or less like, you know, I was forced to get into this. There are markets where some form of directed lending has worked, but there are various frameworks that are put in place to safeguard the institution from the market.
Isn't that a cause for worry? Because yes, we know what has been happening in that particular sector, and the SMEs, you know, economy has been a bit contracting since now we had the interest rate capping. You went now to actually you know, buy government bonds and government papers for that matter. And it has taken out the arm of central bank to come up with this. So this, you say, it's not truly a directive?
No, it's, I mean, the way
what is it?
The way it has been reported
is
like there is a directive that you must lend to entities this amount of your portfolio.
20%.
I think, yeah, that's where the anomaly is in terms of the reporting. But I think the spirit of the banking charter is that way, in that we should now have credit flowing.
So there's no jailing at all.
Now, you see, when the charter is put in place, it then means that there is a framework within which banks are meant to operate. Now, in the event that an institution goes against that framework, then within the Banking Act, there are measures that the regulator can take, which is what he's referring to. There's a particular section that the regulator then can take for going against the framework.
Which one of which?
And punitive measures can be applied.
Oh, yeah, punitive measure, one of which is jailing.
Yes.
Fantastic. I just wanted you to clarify that.
One of which was what?
Jailing. Yes. But what does it portend? Maybe just to open up the discussion with what also the court ruling came up with regarding the interest cap rates, that now they want to sort of review it?
Yeah, maybe I can speak to that a little bit. I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a ruling by the High Court, which found the law that the so-called the banking amendment law that was put in place, which is really the interest capping. It found the specific sections of that law to be vague and imprecise and therefore unconstitutional. Now, the ruling went further to, besides finding that being unconstitutional, the ruling was suspended for a period of 12 months, which then gives the National Assembly time to relook at those specific provisions and make the necessary amendments to remove the unconstitutionality, so to speak, within the framing of the law.
All right.
And also, I think, you know, ultimately, I thought that was a good court decision, but this is a little bit like Brexit. The decision has to be, you've got to thread a needle which is in Parliament, it seems to me. Am I wrong, Habil? I think ultimately that if we're looking for some kind of substantive amendment or change in that, it is actually a political decision. It ends up back in Parliament. It's just like what we're watching in the United Kingdom, and therefore, you know, I wouldn't get too carried away until I see a movement within the Parliament to adjust this. The point about SMEs, which you made, which is a valid one, and also the central bank governor has been making it, is that a lot of these people have been pushed out of the formal banking sector into the mobile money lending sector, where we've had a proliferation. I think I went on Google, there are about 200 of these people on the platform that I could count. And they have been raising a lot of capital. I mean, last year, if you look at Tala, they're the ones who are going and raising more capital than our tier 2 banks have been. So the distortion is quite interesting. And I think, you know, what we've got to do, I would disagree and say we can't compel banks to lend.
You don't
and
get
then
things
that becomes a disaster area when you start doing that. Command economy, you're going down the territory of Vladimir and, you know, and all other kinds of problems. And I think sometimes we look at this as a silver bullet, as an easy fix. Let's price control this and price control that. Give me an example, Debarl, of a price control post-independence where you can tell me it's worked very, very well. I can't find it. I mean, whether it's in any area of our economy, each time I see price control intervention, I think whatever happens, this thing is going to be interfered with in some shape or form. It's not going to work as we want it to work. So I would get away from that kind of thinking, say, have a more free market situation and have more granular pricing. And instead of just saying 14 or 13.5% cap, we're all different risks.
And I think he's right. And I'll give an example maybe which will come up, bring the picture. We were debating something on higher education. Schools start coming up. And we say, don't regulate. The students will say, I want to go to this university or that. Don't regulate. If you are not providing quality education, students will not come to your campus. And you just collapse. And therefore, and I think you're putting it a very difficult, I don't think it's a directive as such. I don't think the central bank really could be talking this as a directive. Let the market operate. I think that is, to me, is important. It's the same thing we have on page 11 of the daily says strengthen NSC self-regulatory rule. They come as SRO. They regulate themselves. I think, to me, those are the things which would be embracing in terms of if you want to really move forward.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think more than all of us, the governors and the central bank know these issues. And what you have here is what I would call central bank activism.
Central bank activism.
Activism, huh? It's an activist central bank.
Not at least with the governor, no.
Yeah. But he's sending signals, not directives. I see these as more as signals, and he knows very well. I haven't talked to him, but I am certain that he understands incentives work better than punitive things. But he's sending signals saying, look, this is a significant part of our economy. SMEs are the backbone of this economy, and they're being shut out of the credit market. So it's a gentle nudge towards making sure that they get the access to credit, and if not, the small slap on the wrist that could follow. But it's not meant to be a punitive threat. That I don't think we'll see anyone go to prison with handcuffs because they didn't lend.
But it's a provision from the law if they don't actually. Yes, let's say from
so I think, as Abila said, I think the sector-based lending should really be the way to go, where you are able to price risk. Because I think the challenge with having a cap is that now you don't know how to price risk, whether it's corporate or SME. But if banks can be allowed to do sector-based lending, and I think that's a signaling that's being done by central bank, please allocate this amount of money to a particular sector that they consider very, very important. That's important. But the challenge has been, how do you price risk? So that's why banks really don't know what to do, and allocating more to the bank, to the government, securities. Yeah.
Okay. Debarl, you haven't touched on the AFDB's economic outlook.
Yeah, we're coming to it. We're in the banking sector.
What I just want to tie in with this, I read through that report, and what was an interesting point, I can't remember where it came, it was talking about the transition of African SMEs into mid-size and large-size businesses. And one of the conclusions your report drew was we're not seeing that transformation and shift, and you were talking about it continent-wide. So I think, you know, the point we're dealing with here is very interesting, and I think an important challenge not only to Kenya Inc., but also to Sub-Saharan Africa. These are our future champions, and if they're not able to get out of the cradle, then we've got an issue. But I don't think you can prescribe. We keep thinking we can prescribe it. I don't think we can, and I think we've got to get away from that kind of thinking. We've got to shift the pitch, tilt it, so that it makes sense. If they want to lend to the SMEs, not at 13 but at 15, we should allow them to do that. It's better off for an SME to have it at 15 than maybe, you know, 10% a month from somewhere else.
All right. And I think that really acts as a segue maybe to also Negatu to tell us more. We have this particular East Africa Economic Outlook that you can see it on your screen, macroeconomics developments and prospects, political economy of a regional integration. You can speak to this, maybe to just give us the highlights, what actually is on the outlook, looking at the region and looking at Kenya, where we are at right now. Gabriel.
Well, I think this is the kind of look at 2019 and look forward to 2020. And clearly the message is this region, the East Africa region, is performing far better than the rest of the continent. I think just to throw out some figures, I think the GDP growth for the East Africa region is again hovering around 5.9, 6.1, whereas for the entire continent we're looking at 4 to 4.1% growth of GDP. So clearly the East Africa region is performing better. But of course, that's an aggregate figure, and it hides more than it reveals. And if you kind of begin to peel it and unbundle it, you find there are some clear front runners. Ethiopia is projected to grow at about 8%, and Rwanda at 7%, and Kenya and Tanzania around 6.5, 6.9. So still well above the continental average. Now, these are sort of the headline figures, but there are still issues that continue to persist. And despite this growth, inequality continues to persist. Inequality continues to persist. There is poverty in the midst of prosperity in Kenya and around the region. And this is a challenge that all of us will have to look at. The growth is not necessarily a job-creating type of growth. For example, growth in the agriculture sector or the industry or agro-industry creates more jobs than any other sector, and that's not where the growth is being observed. So, and the conclusion is economies are not transforming fast enough. You know, we are achieving growth, whether we're exporting commodities or, you know, the traditional sectors, but the transformation that this continent needs to take to effectively join the value addition chain, the value chain and so on, is not happening fast enough. Therefore, the job growth is not concomitant with the overall growth that's being projected, and I think we need to focus on that. And then there are issues of peace and security and so on that is holding back. For example, in this region, the Somalia, the South Sudan, Burundi, Comoros and so on, where there has not been peace and stability for the past few years, the growth has not been as robust as the other regions. The other area, of course, that continues to concern the region is the issue of debt and sustainability. And in this, I mean, I know we're in Kenya and everyone's concerned about debt issues in Kenya, and you've said we'll come to it, but Kenya's debt is there, but it's not something I'd lose sleep over. But overall, debt sustainability, which is partly a function of the fiscal side, our ability to raise revenue domestically.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And it's only when that fails that you begin to see more debt accruing because we are not raising enough money domestically. So I think KRA in this case has a lot more work to do. They're missing the target, and we need to look at why they're missing the target and see how we can grow the revenue base. And not necessarily by going after the same people, but widening the base. And then there's issues around saving to GDP ratio, still quite low. There's room for growth in that area, and we project that as in 2020 and so on, we'll see some increase in the saving to GDP ratio. So these are sort of the big messages here.
Yeah. So those are actually the headlining points from the economic East Africa Economic Outlook 2019. But I'm interested to know, because there've always been this discussion about Kenya losing traction, you know, as being the main cogwheel in the East African economy. Where are we at? Are we losing the grip?
That's a good question.
Yes.
And I think we all need to answer that question.
We all need to answer.
But I think the best, you know, for me, the best indicator of whether Kenya, the cogwheel, is just to look at the flow of foreign investments into Kenya. despite all the issues about corporate governance and even corruption. Yeah, it's there and we're all struggling with it. But there is confidence in the Kenyan economy. There's confidence, investor confidence in the Kenyan economy. The market is the best judge of where an economy stands. And by comparison to the rest of the region, if you look at the flow of FDI into the region.
But Ethiopia was a big standout, Gabriel.
Yeah, Ethiopia has been a standout, but perhaps it's too early.
To judge.
Yeah, to conclude that Ethiopia replaced Kenya as the cog in the East African
I'm not saying
economy.
that, but it's been robust consistently.
Yeah, it's been robust. Ethiopia still has issues that it's working out. Once those are worked out, it will continue to grow. But I should also emphasize the Kenyan and Ethiopian economy are truly complementary. Truly complementary.
But there is a lot of worries, FDIs. I have no problem with FDIs. And when you say that in NSC, the mix is 67 foreign, what are we talking about the domestic? You recall, if you go back as a panelist here, the last time we did an IPO, which was successful, was Kenyan and Safaricom. And what does it translate to? We are not borrowing. If you can't borrow, you can't create wealth. So fundamentally, people don't have the money to buy that. And it's worrying. When you hear your market, most of it is foreign. Fine, with respect to whether they are governance. But if they are not, they don't see the issue of governance. Why are we locals not going to the market?
It's not rocket science, and it's actually I thought was one of the most singular successes of the economic program under President Kibaki, and I don't know why we've dropped the ball.
Correct.
I saw this happen in the United Kingdom under Mrs. Thatcher when she started to sell British Telecom, British Gas. It did two things. It increased the ownership stake that people felt they had, because if you feel you own nothing, you will go out and burn it tomorrow. Because
you can say that again.
But if you, people would keep those certificates, they'd keep them and show them to you. Look, I've got a bit of BT. I'm looking forward to my dividend. I remember being in this building. People had sold cows to buy Kenja. The enthusiasm was so high. And I believe two mistakes were made, and maybe, CEO, you can tell me. I think, what we got to do is we got to make sure we price the thing right. There is no criminal offense in allowing people to make a profit. Sell cheap, your pipeline will keep flowing because everybody will come back and say, look, I made some money, I made some money. The day they don't make it, you kill it. And to me, it was a golden goose. It got the government out of a lot of businesses. They're in too many businesses. They don't have the expertise to run. How many businesses are we looking at?
None at all.
Yeah, over hundreds of them. Sell them off, create more ownership, let people make a profit, create well-being. I don't know why we've let that drop. I really don't.
I think just to, back to your point, Prof.
Yes.
The last IPO was the NSC IPO, by the way. Just a correction.
Which one?
The NSC itself.
IPO itself.
So 6 times oversubscribed, for the record.
You're not a profit making or something.
But to the point about, I think we have a functioning market. And we would like to see a lot of large cap companies come into the market for purposes of raising capital and creating wealth.
Yeah.
If you look at the companies that today are among the large companies, these are former state-owned enterprises, Safaricom, Kengen, Kenya Power, and they've done very well because of being a listed company. So I think the market provides an avenue for value creation and for wealth creation and for capital raising for even the government entities. And so that's why we are very aligned to get the government privatization program to restart in earnest so that they can take advantage of the market. Because Kenyans, the domestic investors would really go for IPOs.
Wouldn't they? And they have something somewhere.
There is a buying will.
Absolutely.
And really, really strong.
Absolutely.
So,
and you can also issue rights issue. You can do that. You don't have to do IPO. I'm already there. But we haven't seen that also.
There are very many avenues.
Yes. And I like his point.
Yeah.
I own Safaricom.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a game changer in the way you think.
And I protect it.
Absolutely.
I protect it.
I will not ban anything in Pesa.
Yes. And that's the reason we say that once ownership brings brand value, it brings also loyalty. And the reason Safaricom is doing well is because Kenya feels they own it. Yeah. So if we have more privatizations, you'll find even the value of those companies will improve. And that's the message we're saying out here. So at the NSC, just to trigger that, we've also started what we call an Ibuka program, which is an SME entry point for companies to actually go through a live incubation. We've got 5 companies so far. We're seeing good traction, and these companies are going to convert into listings. So we're doing our part, but we also would like to see large cap companies become more responsive.
Okay.
All right.
And there's a point about you should not forget. There's somewhere we dropped the ball.
Somewhere we dropped the ball?
As a country, there's somewhere we dropped the ball. Go through this. If you go through the 3 regimes, which Moi, Kibaki, and the current one, somewhere we dropped the ball. And the point I was going to, perhaps, if you look before, the economy, there was a lot of certainty during Kibaki's time. And I remember a colleague of mine, I can know how many hours I'm going to use from Nairobi to Kisumu. Because the road was good. Before, they had no idea whether they will ever reach Kisumu. And I think we need to step back. How do we bring that confidence within? Probably we are still having a lot of people with disposable income. But maybe the environment is uncertain. And if I was actually one thing I was going to, and I know you asked this at the end of the interview, is one of the president today, in my view.
All right.
Government must bring certainty within Kenyans. I cannot be a cabinet secretary, and I don't know whether I'll be in tomorrow. I'm not going to do a lot of work.
All right.
If you behave yourself, if you behave yourself, you'll be certain.
Yeah.
You just need to behave yourself.
But that's also the age-old question around policy-making certainty, right? So, I mean, in any country, when you have policy-making uncertainty, and the most extreme example right now is probably Tanzania, where I saw latest headline, Vodacom, what's the guy been arrested for? I don't know. And you've got considerable uncertainty. And in fact, I think that uncertainty has helped the shilling as well, because people have come flight to safety and supported. In fact, if you model Tanzania and Kenya, you'll often see when the Tanzania shilling sells off, we went below 100. So but the point we're all making is more policy making certainty, and look back at what worked in the last 50 years and bring it back. You know, the privatization thing worked. And I'm surprised we keep going for more debt, Gabriel. We could look at more aggressively at what can be sold off and make sense.
This is what Ethiopia is now experimenting with. As you know, they've put up the telecom, the airline, and the utility and so on, and the shipping line up for partial privatization as a way to inject some money and bring some technology. But again, I mean, Kenya is far ahead in terms of experience and knowledge. I don't know why it's been dropped, but certainly other countries are emulating what Kenya has done in the past.
Did you hear what you see? Tanzania, Ethiopia has a shipping, and they don't have a coast.
And about to have a navy.
Very interesting.
Believe it or not.
Believe it or not.
No, they have about a dozen ships.
Oh, okay.
They have a dozen ships.
All right. Yeah. So I'm interested actually what you raised also from the outlook about the debt, and I think also Ali Kansacho has picked up on it. And the reality is that a rapid buildup of costly public debt in the past 5 years has put the Kenyan economy at the risk of turbulence, according to the African Development Bank. New research, Kenya's public debt crossed the 5 trillion shillings mark for the first time in June last year, representing a growth of 14.3% over 4.41 trillion shillings a year earlier. The Treasury mandarins have often maintained that Kenya can bear its current debt load. The Treasury said last year it is engaging international investors that Kenya owes money to ensure looming debt obligations are managed effectively without exposing the country's coffers to liquidity pressures. The quick build-up of Kenya's debt has raised questions over its sustainability, especially on the external bit, which must be repaid in dollars and other foreign currencies. The government is in the market for a new Eurobond expected at 250 billion shillings, which will partly cover the deficit and provide funds to roll over existing debt. So this is the Eurobond 3.2 I was mentioning. That is in the offing. The question is that because, yes, I think you've been on this occasion, on this particular forum before, and you've warned, you've not really warned, you've told us that we are actually on a very healthy zone, right? But now you have a new research again that is also, posting some warnings as far as this mark is concerned. Are we still on a healthy zone?
Very much.
Very much?
Yeah. Kenya, the debt stock across the region, the percent of GDP is above 30%, and that you know, it's just something to watch. But we are just sort of sounding the alarm for careful management of debt. But what you have described as Eurozone 3.0 is really a refinancing exercise. What the Treasury is doing is borrowing money, perhaps a bit more cheaper than what they currently have, and using it to refinance existing debt stocks. I would not say, again, there's reason to be cautious, and the Treasury is very well aware of that, but this is not going to tip the balance on Kenya. Debarl, for me, I would focus less on the debt issue and focus more on domestic resources.
Absolutely.
You see, that's why we keep going out to the local market, to the international market to raise money, because we have not been able to collect enough in taxes. And I put this squarely at the foot of the KRA. Efficiency, effectiveness, and so on and so forth, but the debt level in Kenya still within a sustainable neighborhood, and what this money is being used for is really to finance a rather expensive borrowing to a less expensive money. That's the bottom line.
Right, but according to Dr. Mbui Wagasha, who's a policy analyst, and of course was the adversary
former ADB
for the executive as much as the economy is concerned. He says that if you look at 2011 and 2012, we were spending only about 11% on GDP. And I think this is where you're asking, where did we drop the ball? And then directly to repay debt, that was 11%. We are now talking about 57% of the GDP in public debt.
Yeah. I mean, I think the point that is coming out, and it doesn't matter which economist you talk to, currently our debt level is at the range of, I think, 5.3 trillion or thereabouts. Just close to 5 trillion.
Put it in percentages.
About 5.3 trillion. And I think whoever you talk to, we have not tipped over yet, but we are reaching there where I think is a concern, and therefore we need to put some bricks to the level of stock that we are accumulating in terms of debt. And it boils down to what Gabriel mentioned about the fact that we need to focus on domestic revenue raising measures through KRA. But even then still, I think we need to put a break to further borrowing.
Correct.
And what we need to do is look for other alternative mechanisms of financing that deficit. And we have talked about the privatization program, which is one alternative. But one other one which has not quite picked up in Kenya is the PPP framework, where you actually get the private sector coming in to help in the financing of the requirement. Now, it hasn't worked as well as it should, but there is potential for it to work. That is one thing that I think we really need to have a serious look at. Now, the only comfort we have, by the way, is that I think the National Treasury is taking this seriously. They have now introduced the Public Debt Management Office within the Treasury. In other words, look at the debt as a real issue which needs to be managed. And they have gotten a very experienced
consultant.
You know, not consultant,
the unit. They've created a unit.
Somebody who has been within the system, formerly the Deputy Governor of Central Bank, and now looking at that. And therefore, we possibly see some element of concern and doing something about it for
if we have that element of concern, then I think there was a niggling worry as far as this debt is concerned. That's why we have
which means that I think even the government itself is realizing that hey, we need to put some level of control on this. Otherwise, the way it was ballooning, I think it was getting out of hand. One of the things that Gabriel mentioned is the fact that the Eurobond 3 that you mentioned is refinancing, which is really trying to restructure the debt. And sometimes in order to manage the debt, and that's possibly what one of the things that the Public Debt Management Office will try to do, is look at the stock of debt we have and can we restructure it, reduce the cost, or even elongate the maturity profile of the debt so that then the repayment per annum, for example, goes down by just maintaining the same stock but elongating the repayment profile.
I want to bring it in a very understandable way, because I think we tend to confuse issues. I would borrow I would go borrow from Gabriel here because I'm going to buy an asset which will create wealth for me. From that revenue of the asset, I'll pay the debt. Yeah. It will not make sense to me to go and borrow and go and pay him. I think what we are saying here fundamentally, the issues we had when we borrowed, we did not utilize those funds prudently.
Return on investment.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's
no, but there's a lag time, though. There's a lag time. This is about...
But you are given by the borrower that opportunity, that grace period.
You talk about squeezing the asset,
yes,
you know, to produce.
Absolutely.
Now, there's a lag time between when these projects are completed and when you expect return to the point where you expect them to pay for themselves.
I think the point I'm making, we need to go back and question ourselves. The project we have invested, and it's good to borrow. I always like borrowing. And probably I would say, as an individual, the assets I have is because I borrowed.
Yeah, of course.
We borrowed. Did we use those assets we created? How did we manage? How did we invest? How did we get the revenue from them? And I think that's why we have an issue. Because ideally, with a print person, and I remember this talking with my father, telling him, Dad, you want this to be done? I'm going to pump this amount of money. But I'm telling you the next 3 I'm out of it. What you get from that, continue.
But Prof, not every asset is revenue generating, right? Let's first agree on that. Sometimes you are borrowing to finance public goods that do not necessarily on a dollar-to-dollar basis generate asset. Yeah.
Correct.
And then there are others. Take the SGR, good example. This clearly is a project for the next 100 years, not even the next 5 years, the next 100 years. If you amortize this project over 100 years period, it will be peanuts, right?
Yes.
But it has started generating revenue, but will it be paying for
itself? That not be the conversation. You go with where you're borrowing from.
Thank you. Which interestingly is exactly what the Prime Minister of Ethiopia has gone and done.
And
he's gone to China and said, look, I've made this long-term investment. It's not paying off. It's not going to pay off in
not
time.
immediately.
And he's restructured the loan.
That's
so the point you're making is completely correct. And I think, Professor, what I found interesting, return on investment is key.
Absolutely.
And Gabriel, we've made long-term investments. It's like running a book at the bank. You're making long-term loans and we're borrowing them too short. So what you've got is this lumpiness that keeps popping up, like right now, where we clearly have to roll over the Eurobond, otherwise we're going to have a big issue. But so we've got to match the assets and the liabilities better. I think that's what this is coming up. And just to point out one quirk, today, there are countries being paid to borrow. If you look at the negative yielding hard currency debt, it's over $10 trillion. Germany and Japan can borrow money at negative interest rates all the way out to 10 years, which is an anomaly. It's not going to happen here, but it's just worth,
That's where we want to be, though.
Yes,
absolutely. I think there's a healthy discourse. I mean, the fact that there's a level of awareness about what our country is doing in terms of borrowing. But I think one of the other things we should not lose is really the other objective of going to the European markets to borrow was to reduce the crowding effect in the banks, to allow to get government out of to reduce the domestic borrowing impact, so that SMEs could access credit. So I think that's another very key conversation that we shouldn't lose. Now, are we in a red zone? I clearly don't say yes, because if you compare us to South Africa and Nigeria, who is just up to 53% of GDP, I think we're fairly comparable. I think it's the ability to debt serviceability, and as you said, are we putting the money in the right investment for both public good and for capital projects? I think that's what we need to do.
But let me just emphasize,
at any point, as a country, maybe in the next 3 years, because I think this also has been concerned out there with Wananchi, that maybe the country will be facing a sovereign default as far as payment of its loans is concerned, and maybe even in the near future insolvency. I don't know. People have been predicating, and they're saying looking at the GDP is a wrong premise to actually look at this debt issue. I do not know. You're the expert.
Looking at what debt to GDP is the wrong criteria.
Is a wrong criteria.
I don't believe GDP. I don't.
You don't,
because we've been focusing on that, and then you people
actually there's a lot of issues around the denominator and inflator that people have been using. So that's a fair thing.
There are three indicators of debt sustainability: debt to GDP, debt to export, and debt to, I don't know what the third one, but there are three key indicators. And on the two, we're still in the green. Now, on the debt to GDP, we may be approaching in the yellow zone, yeah. But that alone cannot be the sole indicator.
The accurate figure now is 57, not 53. 57. 57. And if we reach around 70, then there's a cause to worry. Yeah. And you think with the borrowing that we are actually having, you're saying this is a refinancing. We're also looking at the Sukuk bond. You remember there was speculation, of course, also going to that particular Arabian market also and getting the Sukuk bond as well. I mean, how will that also feed into? And will this particular needle also move up a jot as far as...
Let's become hard on ourselves.
And possibly down.
Say, let's manage it. Yeah. Let's not. Yeah. I think I appreciate my colleagues. They're very optimistic. Their glass is half full. I think it's half empty. And let's try to. I think what you're saying, and I'll give you an example. How politically you want to look at. 24 years we are better than Somali. That made us. I think when we say yes, it's a concern. I'm not saying we are in the red. It's a concern. So we start addressing it. Yeah. And I think it's important. And there are the issues. You keep giving us this 15. I hope somebody else are reading the one on the corner there. U.S. puts Kenya on the list of crash landing hotspots. So there are issues also there. You have the corner there.
But Debarl, just to wrap up, and to be fair, there is concerted effort being taken by the Treasury to address this issue.
And I think we should be fast.
Today, as a lender, I can tell you, to get a project approved by the government of Kenya, even for infrastructure and things like that, has become extremely difficult because there is an entire review process. The concessionality of the loan is looked at very closely. So the Treasury, as all of you have said, is taking a very good look. There's a debt management unit. So I think in the short term, I don't see the needle going up. If anything, it will probably start going down because debts are being cancelled. Debts to the EDB, World Bank, and others are being cancelled if they are not performing, and the money is being returned. So there is considerable progress being made in this regard.
All right. And of course, maybe this was informed by what World Bank had actually come up with in 2018 on the country policy institutional assessment,
CPIA,
that is CPIA, which said that the Treasury's debt management unit lacks adequate staff. Yeah. So you are looking for consultants, as you mentioned, or clear leadership, right, and accountability. So Kenya's CPI index dropped to 3.8% from 3.7% last year.
But out of 4.
Out of 4.
Out of 4. So it's not a bad place to be. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's just also just move on, Jot, and we try and look at our last. And I had you talking about the revenue collection, which was is a niggling worry in this country as well. And we know that the President Uhuru Kenyatta recently ordered the formation of a multi-agency team that will come up with an integrated revenue collection system to be used both at the national and the county governments. The multi-agency team will draw its membership from Commission of Revenue Allocation, that is also the Council of Governors, the National Treasury, and the Kenya Revenue Authority. Currently, counties and the national government utilize 11 different revenue systems, which is blamed for the low level of collections. The project by a multi-agency team seeks to develop and facilitate the provision of secure, up-to-date geospatial data at a minimum cost. The project is expected to be completed in 2020 and has come up with a model county revenue system from the digital data generated. So we can couple this also with the exit of Njiraini. Of course, looking at the revenue collection, it has been performing dismally, but also experts say that maybe the National Treasury puts a very high target for Kenya revenue allocation. Could we just talk about the single tax collection system?
Every year. Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether it's setting a high target, but if you've noticed, it's like Groundhog Day. It's like Brexit. She keeps coming back with the same thing. But every year, the target, we all know, yes, the same thing changes an apostrophe. And this is a substantially new thing. But but every year that I've noticed, it's we over-targeted, and I don't know whether that's a statistical bias, Habil, that we just have, that we're just looking through things with rose-tinted spectacles, and we miss it every year. And I think politically it doesn't make sense to keep doing it like that because it creates this entire debate. So maybe we're not just setting realistic targets. I agree with what Gabriel's saying, but I think we're actually overtaxing a very small group of people. And if I was thinking about it, I would say, let's look at models where you reduce the tax and see what happens then. I think you'd collect more money. Yeah, and then have a look at things which are not coercive, but you come with a very low number to increase the tax net. I saw that number of 15% turnover tax. I thought that was too high. I think kick it off with something which is painless. People won't feel it. They'll start paying it. And then you play at the margins with increasing it. But coming in with 15, you just won't pick up what you think you're going to pick up. So that's my perspective.
I think I'm just going to add on to that. I think the whole thing is the budget formulation process in Kenya. You see, how does it start? It normally starts with the budget policy statement, and then you see the expenditure estimates, which are then taken through the parliamentary process. And then at the budget reading day by the cabinet secretary, then he comes up with the revenue raising measures to meet that expenditure that has already been approved. And that's when you see things like, you remember last year there was Robin Hood tax, cropped up from nowhere, because he's trying to, propose some tax measures that will meet that expenditure that has already been approved. And so you end up loading KRA with measures that cannot be met, with targets that cannot be met. So I think the first thing will be to realign our budget making process so that the expenditure and revenue raising measures are at the same time, so that you can see what's being budgeted for as you propose revenue raising measures, rather than the case whereby the expenditure is already approved and then you're coming up with the revenue raising measures subsequently.
And I think that's the point I think Gabriel was bringing, where you have this management. The BOPA, the budget outlook paper, if you're saying you're going to correct this math, I think it's very important to what do we want to do. And you cannot put in terms of your expenditure on the expected revenue from Kenya Revenue Authority. I think it will be difficult. And I've said in this forum, and I'll say again, any government which raises taxes is the most lazy government. It's the most lazy way to raise taxes. I think you're better off. And Wawero did it. And I have raw respect for JB. JB is Jiraine. But Wawero did it. And Wawero had the political support. One of the things I remember, one of the things Kibaki never missed, those who actually followed it, he never missed the day people were saying this is how much taxes were paid. And alikuwa anatuambia kila wakati, naomba mlipe ushuru. Every time, that was his message. Because I do recall when Kemunya was a Minister for Finance, 95% of our budgets was through the taxes. That's what did Wawero do? Wawero talks, Odudo, you have a problem with you paying your taxes? I'll give you this soft landing. So you start paying. And I think today we see taxation as a punitive. I should see it's a way that I'm willing to pay, I'm willing to declare, I've made this money.
Thank you.
And I think if we approach that, people can pay more. People are willing to pay.
I think two issues here. One is, when you look at taxes, you need to look at both sides of the balance sheet, both the revenue side, but the expenditure side. And I think we need to tame the expenditure side a bit more so that it is in line with things. But where I see KRA could do much more is try to bring in the informal sector into the tax net. And
not as punitive.
Yeah, not as punitive, but instead of this horizontal, vertical thing where you keep drilling down on the same people, expand the tax base. But that you do by reaching out to the informal sector, which is a large part of the private sector, and see how you can bring them into the tax net by giving them the incentives, as Prof was saying, the incentives to become taxpayers and who see the value of being formalized rather than remaining outside the tax net.
Yeah, in fact, the one point I think we also should capture is tax administration. I think, how is this tax being collected? I mean, and what's the level of compliance? Because I don't think Kenyans want to hide and want to stop paying taxes, but it's how is it being applied? And the directive said it should be less punitive. It must be accommodative, so that even if I have arrears, even if I have certain challenges, there should be a platform that can help me remediate that position probably over time.
Right, thank you. I think we're strapped for time, but we want to see also what Christine Lagarde has to say about the global economy outlook briefly before we wind out. Let's listen in. Excuse me.
I pointed to clouds of risks on the horizon. And today, if you ask me, the weather is increasingly unsettled. Now, what do I mean by that? In January, The IMF projected global growth for 2019 and 2020 at around 3.5%, which was a downgrade from our previous estimate. And it was certainly less than in the recent past, but still reasonable. It has since lost further momentum, as you will see from our updated forecast that will be released exactly a week from today. So I'm not going to give numbers. Suffice to say that it has lost some momentum. For this year, we expect not 75, but 70% of the global economy to experience a slowdown in growth. Exactly the opposite of what we had. But, just to be clear, we do not see a recession in the near term. In fact, we expect some pickup in growth in the second half of 2019 and into 2020.
Well, that's it. And maybe we can just also weigh in briefly with our closing remarks as well. And today also is a big day, State of the Nation address. You can see that editorial cartoon, right? Ali Kansachi, your closing remarks, 30 seconds.
She's talking about the macro global economy. There's still a lot of uncertainty. US-China tariff war, they seem to be looking to try and resolve that, that level of uncertainty. I'm seeing a lot of uncertainty in emerging markets. And I think you can see, you know, stresses, particularly look at somewhere like Turkey, currency under pressure. This reminds me of previous emerging market crises. So I think she's referring to that as well. But she's right. We live in a very fast, fluid, and volatile environment.
Thank you. Thank you, Ali Kansachi.
I think the critical path we are walking now is very key to note that Brexit is going to be a key issue for us as we watch through it. I think the correlative effect between the UK and Kenya is really strong. We need to really put our eyes there. I think it's good that we broadened our investor space, which now covers Americas, UK, and China. But I think critical to me is how this will come to affect the market, and we are really watching on that.
Right. Abdullah, your closing remarks?
I think it's not all doom and gloom. Yesterday there was a release of a report on the FinAccess survey report, which I think for us it was some positive, message coming in through the economy, where the financial inclusion rate has really soared for Kenya from just about 25% in 2006. It was showing something like 82.9% in terms of financial inclusion for Kenya, which means that we are on the right path in terms of getting people within the financial inclusion agenda. And for that, I think is a very positive message for us.
I see a lot of optimism around regional integration for this region. You have the traditional East African countries, and then there's a new emerging collection of countries pivoting on Kenya and Ethiopia, but bringing in the traditionally non-friendly countries, Eritrea, Djibouti, even Somalia. There's an article today that Foreign Secretary is making peace with things. So
thank you.
A lot of hope.
Yeah, quick one. I think it's very important to come to the point we are the only people who can change this economy, and I'm very positive. I think we have a responsibility. But two things today, I was listening to the president. Government must start spending. Government is not spending.
Or paying its bills.
Right, on paying its bill. And thirdly, I think the president must bring this country to a level of certainty.
Right, thank you. Let's leave it at that. I want to thank you, our panelists, this morning for that engaging discussion on the state of the economy. And of course, also remember today, the State of the Nation will be up. Look at this particular editorial cartoon that was drawn by Gado today. Right, this is the State of the Nation. Uninyunyozie maji Bwana, unioshe nitakase, niwe mweupe kabisa na kweli. And you can see they're actually, showering in dollars, Antoinette and the rest. Thank you so much, guys, for that engaging discussion. Have a lovely day, and of course, we shall be covering this live for you, wall-to-wall, wire-to-wire coverage live from Parliament.